All this work just to change a radiator and fan assembly in a 2005 Mazda 6. Stay tuned if you want to learn how. Hey there YouTube, welcome to the ACH Automotive channel. We're going to work on our 2005 Mazda 6 today. We're going to work on changing out the radiator and the radiator fan, the water pump, and the thermostat. So lots to cover in this video. You can see I have rearranged my shop a little bit here. Picked it up, got some stuff out of the way, almost got the workbenches cleaned up here. The plan is to hopefully start working on our Mustang again. I've kind of put the Dart on the back burner for the time being, just because I don't have some of the parts and tools I need to finish the Dart, and I don't want to invest in them right at this moment. So we have the gas tank to go back in the Mustang and have all the Pour 15 stuff to do the underside of it. We've just got to get a warm day and get it up in the air so that I can clean it and paint it and get the gas tank back in. With that being said, I've also got stuff coming for the F-150, so there'll be some videos on that here shortly. But let's get into the Mazda. The first thing we have to do is get the front bumper cover off, and that's probably going to take a little bit of time just because there's a lot to it. So let me get started, and we'll come back when the cover is off, and I'll show you how to take it off. On this car, to get the bumper off, there's a couple of things we've got to do here. First of all, you're going to want a hood support. I'm just using a piece of wood because this upper core support comes out to get at the radiator. You're going to, this bumper cover is already busted over here. You can see somebody had took a chunk out of it. This was something that I've been meaning to fix. Anyway, there's a bunch of plastic push-in screws down here. There's a couple of 10mm bolts here. And same thing on this side, it's already busted, so I just popped it off. We've got a couple of screws down here we've got to get out. And then there's probably some plastic push pins underneath the front, and this whole fascia should come off. Once we do that, I believe the lights have to come out. There's a push pin here on each light and a couple of bolts, and obviously the wiring assembly we've got to pull out. And then we've got to pull this top core support out. And I think by that point, our fan is already loose. I've already undone most of that. Once I get this stuff out of the way, I'll put a pan under it. We'll drain the coolant, and I'll strip the radiator out, and we'll put the new one in, and we'll get moving on it. Our bumper cover is almost ready to come off. Couple of things. Normally, you would have to pull this screw out up here, but the cover is broken, so it's just hanging there. Same thing, there's usually plastic screws over here. This car I know had well, that was interesting. This car I know, this headlight kept blowing, so my brother-in-law has popped these out a couple of times, and they probably fell out. There's a bunch of 7mm bolts underneath here. Same thing for both sides. And then in the center, this is where I'm fighting with right now. There's a screw here and a screw here that's holding the cover on the bottom. And unfortunately, those clips are pretty rusty being up in New England, and you know, the age of the car, the mileage on the car. So unfortunately, those guys, I may have to drill those out because I can't get them. They're just spinning, and there's no real good way to get on the back side of them. Let's see if I can show you this. So these are the screws. There's two of them. There's actually a 10mm nut on the backside. I thought they were a clip. I can't break them loose. I've tried. Can't put any heat to them because it's plastic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to end up just drilling them out, and then we'll replace them later. Oh, we got the bumper cover off. I ended up grinding out those two screws in the bottom. We'll replace them with something else later. Now we've got to take off the headlight assembly. There's bolt here, a clip here. I believe these are 10mm bolts. There's another 10mm down there, and there's a couple over here. So we'll take the headlights out. We'll take this top bar off here. I think pretty much mostly 10mm bolts. Now I have seen some guys that have had to take this crash bar off. I'm hoping I don't have to do that. I'm hoping we can just kind of squeak it by, but I'm not sure. We'll have to try it out. If that's the case, then we'll have to take this bar off. We do not want to touch the AC condenser because I'm assuming the system is charged, and I have no intentions on although that doesn't look too healthy over there. I have no intentions on breaking the system and rebuilding that at this point. Plus, if it's got Freon in it, or refrigerant, I'm sorry, you can't release that to the environment. It's got to be captured appropriately, and I'm not doing that at this time. So we're gonna work on getting the radiator and fan taken out. Okay, we are halfway there. The next step, yeah, unfortunately, yeah, I can't. I'm gonna have to take this crash bar off. Looks like probably 12 or 13 millimeter bolts. Pull these 10 millimeters up here that hold it in to the fender apron, and then I think that's pretty much, you get the back side of it. I'm gonna pull these bolts here maybe, or something along those lines. I'll figure it out, just so we don't have to play with adjustment. I hate playing with the adjustment on stuff after the fact. So you might want to get some blocks of wood just to support the core support once it comes unbolted. And then we should be able to get to the radiator, drain it, put the, take all the lines and everything off of it, and take it out and put the new one on. This is this would be a great time if you have a new set of headlights. I do not. I'm not putting that into this car at this moment. But this would be a great time if you had new headlights to throw in, or if you wanted to clean up the old headlights. You can see those are pretty foggy. This would be the perfect time to do it, because you have to take the bumper cover off to get to the headlights. All right, I'm gonna spray a little bit of Croil on these bolts here, because they're, oops, come on, a little crusty, and I don't want to break one in there. Those soak for a little bit. See if that soaks in there. This, my can is starting to get a little empty here. I have to get some more. So we need to get these bolts out here. These guys, I'm gonna guess, are 13, so I have to go get one out. See if we can get this out. Is that out? Is that? A little Croil helps quite a bit. So these guys are 13s, or probably half-inch would work too. So let me get these bolts off, and we'll get this core support, this crash bar out. We've got to get, there's a few more things we've got to disconnect here. This harness, and then I got to figure out how to get under there and drain the radiator and pull the transmission coolant lines off, and then hopefully all this should come right out. I can see the clamp there for the radiator. We can pull this upper hose off to get it out of the way. I've got, like I said, I've got a new thermostat. I didn't bother replacing the hoses just because they look like they're in pretty good shape. I do have to get some of this stuff out of the way so I can get into the water pump assembly. I have a whole new water pump unit for it, so we'll do that when this comes out. Well, I pulled the radiator fan out. Right now it's just hanging out there. We've got to drain the radiator now and pull the lower coolant line off, and then the transmission coolant lines have to come off, and then this line goes to the coolant recovery tank, so we've got to pull that off as well. Once we do that, the radiator can come out, and then we should have enough room to get at our water pump assembly here. We may need to, I'm thinking well, once we drain it, we'll pull the thermostat out. I have a brand new thermostat. We'll pull all that assembly out, and that'll give us access to our water pump and water pump housing, and we'll be able to pull that off, change it, and then we'll put the new radiator, new cooling fan, and control module back into the car. To get your radiator out, you've got to pop this clip out here. I've already done it over here. You just pop it out, there's a little rubber tab, and then the radiator will slide back. That, and then your little rubber insulator just kind of slides out. There we go. And now your radiator should come out the back. Still have to disconnect the cooling lines for the transmission and get a pan under there, and then the line for the coolant overflow or fuel tank. All right, while we're in here, we'll change our thermostat. It's a there are 3 8mm bolts that hold it in. I'm not taking the hose off. I'm not replacing it, so we're just taking the housing off here. I'm gonna put the new thermostat in it, and it wasn't overheating. It's just, you know, it's got 200,000 miles on it, and I'm in here. I got the cooling system drained. I probably, you know, I should replace the hoses, but like I said, they're not in bad shape, and you got to call it at some point. So that is where I'm calling it. We'll get this out of the way here so that I can get the water pump off next. Another day working on the Mazda. Had to stop the other day because of 2 issues. Bent radiator. Have a brand new one now that is not bent, so we'll be putting that in. I don't know if I'll get to that today. But more importantly, taking this water pump pulley off and getting this water pump off, because we have a brand new pump for it. You'll notice on this car that the belt goes around the camshaft pulley and then around the water pump. Now, some of the earlier 3.0s had a tensioner here. The reason that this car doesn't have a tensioner is because on some of the later 3.0s, they removed the tensioner because they found that it put too much, I think, front load on this on the exhaust cam and ended up bending it or breaking it. So Mazda removed it. So you have just this 2-pulley system. I am going to take this pulley off here using a tool that I had to special order that I didn't realize you needed to take this all apart. I was hoping I didn't have to. I shouldn't say that. I knew that getting this pulley off, you needed a special tool. What I didn't realize was you needed to take this pulley off in order to get to the water pump, which is silly design, but it is what it is, because you can't get to these bolts with this pulley in the way. There are some guys that will use a power steering puller. I didn't want to Mickey Mouse something. I wanted to get the right tool to show you how to do the job correctly. So I made the investment in the tool. It was about 120 bucks from Tooltopia, I think is where I got it. And it just showed up today. So we're going to try and pull this pulley off. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put the puller on it, and we're going to pull the belt off, and hopefully there's enough play in it to get it off. I haven't really figured out how to get the belt off without there being a tensioner. So let me see how it goes. Let me show you the tool that I got here. Like I said, it was about 120 bucks. I think I got it from Tooltopia. It's an OTC part number 7483A. Comes with the special backing. It'll remove and install it. It's specifically for the Ford 3.0. So it fits pretty much anything that has a Ford 3.0 that it'll work on. And if you have one, it's good to have. Kind of disappointed that it didn't come with a case, because now I got to keep the box on the shelf. All right, I have our OTC tool, puller tool set up here. I have the brace that goes on the back of the pulley. There are 2 bolts that go through into the brace. And then you have this threaded rod that goes here, which is a 13mm. These are 15mm bolts. And then, I don't know if the camera will pick up on it, there's a little push attachment there. And I have soaked the camshaft and the inner part of the pulley with Croil. And I did, off camera, get it to start to move. And I am doing this with the belt on because I don't really have a better way of getting the belt off at this point. So if anybody knows how to get the belt off, and again, I haven't really looked, I just figured it would pop off with the pulley. There we go. All right, pulley is off. There we go. Now you can see, so this pin goes through the center here and presses against the camshaft, and then this piece here just pulls it so it kind of holds the pulley. And then installing it is pretty much the reverse of this. There's a special tool that comes with it to push it back on. That is what it looks like. Now, our new water pump comes with a new housing, so we'll have to take this clamp off, take this hose off, and there is a lower hose here that we'll have to take off as well. So pull our belt out of the way. This belt looks like it's in pretty good shape, so I'm going to reuse it. And you know, I believe there are threads in here that we'll use to pull it back on. So you want to clean the end of this up and get any debris off of it. And then I think there's 3 bolts that hold this pump to the car. 1, 2, 3, I believe. I'll have to double check. Are 3 8mm bolts that hold this housing to the car here, here, and here. Once we get that, you can see the pump's already almost loose. We've got this hose, and I believe there's another little guy down here that we've got to break. I'm going to probably take the pump off first and then do the hoses just to see what we're dealing with, and then it'll be in my hand maybe a little easier than trying to take them off the way they are. You do need to be careful. This manifold here is all plastic, so let me get these bolts out and we'll see. I guess maybe I can get it off. Maybe I'll take this off here at this point and go from there. I think one of these housings, yeah, this one's plastic, I think, back here. So hopefully I don't have to buy this pipe or this piece. There's a lot of hoses on this car. I got the water pump out of the housing. Now, the new pump comes with a new housing. However, I am thinking I am not going to change the housing, just simply because I really don't want to mess with all those hoses. I'm not changing them. I don't have them in my hand, and they're really not that bad. So at some point, you have to call it. I have spent a lot of money on this car, and I still have to do the front end with the wheel bearings, and I think I'm going to do the rear shocks on it. So I don't really want to spend more on it than I have to at this point. Things have changed for me, so I'm just looking to get the car back together so I can drive it. So I think I'm going to throw the pump in and call it good. Unfortunately, this is not exactly what I was expecting to see when I took this apart based on what I saw when I took the hoses off. These typically have a plastic impeller, which obviously this one does, but usually the plastic starts to come apart. So either somebody has changed this and you know, it's still got a plastic impeller, but you know, they've changed it, or I don't know what I saw then, because when I pulled the hose off I thought I saw plastic pieces, but you know, it was a long day, so it's possible I saw something that I thought I saw and didn't actually see it. So without further ado, I am going to get the new pump out and we are going to put that in the housing. I'm going to clean up the mating surfaces here, and we'll probably really have to power wash this thing when I get it back up, because it's pretty greasy. The motor's pretty greasy. I think the seal here is leaking, and I didn't even think about that when I did the valve covers. So if you're doing the valve covers and stuff, you probably want to replace this, but I did the valve covers. That will take care of most of it. I'm not taking it all back apart again for that. You know, let's just get it running and then we'll go from there. This is our new pump. I'm going to take the pump off the housing assembly. It is a Gates, let's see here, I don't know, there's a couple of part numbers, 43230BH, 94323OBH. I'll try and put the link to that in the description. Like I said, I am going to just slap the pump on there because I don't want to really deal with it. There's a new gasket in there, and you can buy it with just the pump and not the housing. Price was not much different, so you can see there's 3 hoses there. I don't really want to play with those at this point, so we're going to pull this off and put it back on. Next thing we need to do, I'm going to just probably take a little piece of either emery cloth or sandpaper and just scuff up this edge, because you can feel there's a ridge here, so that the pulley will slide back on. Probably put a little grease on it just to help the pulley slide back on. We'll use our OTC Duratec tool here to push the pulley and the belt back on. Once that's on, we can put the new thermostat in, put the housing back on, and then we should be ready to put the radiator assembly back in the car. Got the pulley on, had a little bit of issues getting it on. There was a little rust ridge on the inside there that was causing it to cock, so I just kind of took a little piece of sandpaper, sanded it down. You need to get this on perfectly straight. You don't want it cocked, otherwise it's gonna walk back and forth. So you can see I've got it back on now, and we should be able to pull this out of the camshaft. So let me get my other wrench here. And again, this guy is a 9/16. This one is an 11/16. You thread this piece in until it bottoms out, and then you'll screw this down, and this is actually what moves on the threads to pull the pulley in or suck the pulley in. It's very much like it's the same way you do a power steering bump, basically. I put a little lube on the thread, like I said, a little Croil. That's what I had. You can use anything. And I did not put the belt on with this. I didn't like the way that it was going on. I've got to figure out how to get this guy back over this, since there is no tensioner. I believe there are some tricks to getting it over. I just don't know what they are. Usually I am used to having a belt with a tensioner on it. It's gonna look a little funny in the middle of the video with everything done. I realized that my camera didn't record audio for this part. The way I got this belt back on, once I got the pulley on, was I kind of walked it on, and then I took screwdrivers, rounded screwdrivers, not the square type, but the rounded ones, flat blade. Walked it on kind of like you would walk a like a tire tube on. That's how I got it on. I don't know if that's the right way or not. Didn't really find a whole heck of a lot of information on how to do it without the tensioner. There's some zip tie tricks, but I didn't have the motor ready to run. They wanted you to bump the motor over with the zip tie, and I didn't understand that. So that's how I got it back on. Don't know if it's the right way, but that's how I did it. We have gotten a radiator from Rock Auto that is not bent, finally. The first one showed up, it was real suede, and I couldn't get the fans to bolt up. But now you see that they line up, and the unit is, you can't probably see it, it's going to be backwards, Denso 41804 221-3512. So when you buy a radiator online, always keep the packaging material and always open it right away and make sure that that it's not bent, because every time, or almost every time, I've bought a radiator online or a condenser, it's shown up broken. So definitely make sure you check that out right away when you order one online. I am going to go ahead and put the bolts in and just put this assembly back together so that when I start work on the car this weekend, this is ready to bolt back in. The radiator and condenser assembly is all back together. The next step, you can see I've got it loosely sitting in the car. We've got to connect all the rubber lower lines, so we're going to do that next. And then once I do that, we should be able to get our core support sitting over there and start bolting this back together. I've got the transmission cooler lines attached and the overflow tank tube attached. What we need to do now is attach the lower radiator hose, and to do that I've got to put the thermostat back in. So I have a brand new Stant part number 14138 thermostat. It's the stock size thermostat. Let me get this opened up here. Brand new thermostat right there. It's got a little bleeder piece in it. That's got to go up, and it sits in the car like this, and there's a gasket that goes around it. Okay, that's in place. Let's get the bottom one in place here. Is our lower radiator hose. Thermostat's been changed. Hoses are ready to go. This one will be last to connect. I'm not going to connect that till everything's back in, because I've got stuff to bolt to the back of the radiator fan assembly. We'll hook this guy up, and then we should be able to clear everything out of the way up here and put our core support back in. The radiator and everything is back in. I've got all the lines hooked back up. We are going to use our AirLift part number 550000. It's a really long number, 55,000 or 550,000 tool to check the. First of all, we're going to use it to check for leaks. You can see I've got the gauge here. This is the siphon hose, or the Venturi hose. It may spit a little, so we'll put it in a bucket. We've got it sitting, I've got an adapter on here. We've got it sitting in the reservoir of our Mazda, and I'm waiting for my shop air to get up to 90 pounds. what we're looking for is this gauge needs to stay between 24 and 26 inches once we take the vacuum off, and that will indicate there are no leaks in the system. If it starts to drop, then we know we have a leak and we've got to figure out how to address it. If we don't have a leak, then we can take this hose off, and there's a siphon hose here which will go on it and into a bucket of coolant, and it will begin to suck the coolant into the system. The reason we use this is to keep air pockets or air bubbles out of the system. This is a better way of doing it. This tool was about, I want to say $150, give or take. I think I got it from Tooltopia. So first time using it, brand new kit, comes with a bunch of adapters and things. So let me go get the shop air and see what happens. Cool. We have got our system working here. It took a little bit. Like I said, this is the first time I have used this. Yeah, that's normal. This AirLift system. On this car, I had, so you can see how I've got it set up here, and this system does have some coolant in it, so that's why it's screaming. Hopefully the mic doesn't pick up on that. What I was first using, I think it was this donut here, and it wasn't sealing properly. So you get these 3 donuts that come with this kit, and 2 of them don't fit. They're either, one's too big, one's too small. One does fit, but it does not seal. What they also give you with this kit is this cone. That's what I ended up having to use on this car. Now you want to get this gauge between 24 and 26 psi, and when I close this gauge, close this valve here, it should. We disconnect shop air, it should hold that pressure for a couple of minutes. You want to make sure it holds that pressure because that tells you don't have any leaks in the system. So that is where I got stuck. You need to have it set up with this cone. It should pretty much immediately start pulling a vacuum. If you are waiting, because I was waiting thinking that it was going to take a while, if you're waiting more than a minute, then you have something wrong. It's not working. You either have a leak or something's not working correctly. It should pull vacuum very quickly. Now that we've got this done here, I can attach the other line. We'll want to bleed this first so it doesn't suck air into the system, and then we will be able to pull coolant into the car, into the radiator. Getting ready to fill our system. This is what we're using here. It's the orange Prestone Dex Cool. It's the same stuff GM uses for the 2005 Mazda. This is the correct fluid for the car. The newer ones use the blue fluid, I believe, from what I read. We've had the system siphoned for, I don't know, probably 10-15 minutes or so. It's held steady. Cleaned out a bucket here, fairly clean. Washed it with hot soap and water to make sure there's no debris in there. We've got our siphon hose, which we've got to bleed, and I've got to fill the bucket with coolant, and we'll open the valve and let her rip. I've got 2 open bottles already, so we're gonna use those first. Hopefully I have enough. All right, got a funnel on the end here. Gonna put a little bit in, then we'll take the funnel off, and we'll put it in the bucket. Actually, you might want to pop this off here because you're going to want to let air in. Just a little. It doesn't have to be open all the way. We don't want this bucket to run out. I'm going to put the rest of this in here. We can always put it back in the container after. Again, I don't know how much this is actually going to take because there is still some in the block. I didn't fully drain the system. I believe from what I read, this car takes about 2¼ gallons from a dead empty. One thing that you might notice when you're working on your car with this AirLift system is that the hoses will suck down. That's indicating there's a vacuum on the system, so that's normal. Don't be afraid if you see that. All right, we've got most of the air out of the line. I'm going to go ahead and open this valve, and we're going to open this valve. Should start to suck coolant into your system. Like I said, you don't want this bucket to go empty. Once your gauge gets back down to 0 here, you can pretty much guarantee that the system is full at this point. You can see that my hoses have uncompressed, so we should pretty much be ready to go. You know, you might have to, once things settle out, you might have to top it off a little bit. I still have a little bit of coolant left in the bucket, so that is, you know, that's how you use the AirLift system. So let me get all this picked up. We'll throw the headlights back in, we'll throw the bumper cover back on, we'll fire it up and see how she does. You can see I've turned it around, so I guess that must mean it's back together, which it does. We've got everything buttoned up. I was able to take it for a ride on my quarter-mile driveway, so we took it for a couple of laps. Everything's back together. She comes up to temperature, no problems. Everything looks good. I don't see any leaks. Little oil burning off from some of the work that we did. Yeah, I had my OBD Wiz application. I looked at it. I can see that the PCM is commanding the fans on appropriately. They're nice and quiet. You can't even hear them or feel them on. That's why I had to look and use the computer to verify they were coming on. They were so quiet. Quite a bit of work left to go. Still did quite a bit of work on the car already. Like I said, things have kind of changed for me, so I don't know how long I will keep this car. Family is expanding, so not really the right size for 3 kids, so we'll see what happens in the next few months here if we replace it with something a little bigger. So thank you guys very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it, leave me a comment if there's something you want to know about the car. Like I said, I've got some more stuff to do to it before the end of the summer. Lots more videos coming on it. We're going to get back to the F-150 and the Mustang. I've got all the tools and stuff to finish up the pitman and idler arms for the F-150, and it's starting to get warm now, so we should be able to get back to the paint for the gas tank of the Mustang. So again, if you like this video, like and subscribe below. You can follow along on social media at achautomotive. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and as well as YouTube. So feel free to follow along there as well, and thank you very much for watching.